So is Chandra here? Oh, hey, Chandra, come on up. So we have Chandra Gnanasambandam. He's a senior partner here at McKinsey locally. We also have Jai Das, who's the president and partner at Sapphire Ventures. And of course, where's my good buddy, Sriram? Viswanathan from Celesta is here as well. So I'll let you guys take it away.
Nice to see you.
Hey, good to see you. Hey, good to see you.
Okay. Okay. Can you guys hear us? Can you hear me?
Yep.
All good. Okay. Should we get going?
Yes.
Jay and Sriram already? Okay. So AI infrastructure, right? Look, we would like to keep this very, very interactive, okay? So it's meant to be a panel, but let's keep it very interactive. And I think this is not a stable topic, right? This is a moving topic. So there is no crystal ball. We don't have perfect answers. So it's more, we'll frame the questions and then we'll have a debate. So what I'll do is I'll sort of start with some thematic observations, right? So I lead McKinsey's high-tech practice globally. So I have a vantage point into what our clients are doing with AI, right? These are large, not just the technology companies who actually produce technology, but large corporations that are actually using it, right, to actually capture value to make change. So I'll just start with two or three observations, and then I'll frame a couple of questions, and then we'll go from there. Theme number one is really, Gen AI is really hard, right? You go to any CEO, right? The first thing they will say is it's actually very, very hard. And there is very little value that's being captured today, right? There are some great examples, right? If you look at Moderna and what they have done, there are pockets of examples, but they are far and few between. In general, the theme is AI is really hard. The reason why it's really, really hard, it's nothing to do with technology at all. It's all about business change. It's all about, rewiring the processes. It's all about upskilling talent. It's all about driving change. It's all about, getting the data plumbing right so that you can actually do inferencing, right? And so it's very little to do with the fact that I can actually get data into an LLM. I can actually, I can do RAG on an LLM. It's not that at all. It's all around business change, operating model change, talent change, rewiring things. So that's sort of one theme, which is this is really hard, and capturing value is hard, and even thinking about what are the vectors of value capture, right? What are the right impact vectors? That's hard. Question or observation number two, and this is very new. In fact, I was sharing with my colleagues here that I was talking to a mining CEO just earlier in the week, and the question was, and this is one of the largest mining corporations in the world, and this is a very tech-savvy CEO. And the question was, he was like, hey, Chandra, look. He was like, 9 months ago, we actually rolled out 2 of the LLMs in, and it started working. Then he said, I met with one of these CEOs, and he said, it's really SLMs, right? Small models, the training costs are too high. It's not really applicable for all the processes. So we actually rolled that in. Then he said, I have this agentic workflow platform. We actually rolled that in. Then he said, I spoke to Sam Altman. Then he said, look, reasoning is really important for a bunch of business processes. The O model. So that's in now. So he was like, what's the architecture here? So are we going to have 8 more of this? Or, is this it? And, how do I know what to use for what use cases, what workflows, what business processes? And so there is a fundamental sort of what is the architecture, even with the foundation models, what's the right architecture, what's the stack that's beginning to emerge, right? And so a lot more questions than answers here. So with that as a backdrop, right, which is really AI is hard because of business change, there are some fundamental questions about the stack and the architecture. My first question to Sriram and Jay is, how do you guys see clients or large companies thinking about impact? Is it really just labor? Is it really time to market? is it really customer experience that's fundamentally changing? Is it really all of it? Do you actually see any proof points?
Yeah, look, I'll start with saying that in our firm, we gave everybody the ability to use ChatGPT, and nobody really is using it, right? And if you go in and ask any enterprise, CIOs will tell you the same thing, other than using Copilot for making your software development kind of process and ability to write code getting faster. People are not really using anything of importance. They're using to write some emails and doing things, but nothing of consequence, right? So I think, but the pockets where you do see adoption, and I think where the first impact is happening, is probably in customer support, because that is an easiest kind of place to put, that is already was well kind of understood, where people were already using chatbots and messaging to get around it, and now it's a lot easier to kind of enable, like a sales agent or a customer support agent to kind of answer all the questions. But I think some of the issues is that people still have to understand in the business context about how are they going to use these LLMs and these models, right? Like the chemistry prize went to the finding all the proteins, right? Those kind of things, people in DeepMind can do it, but if you talk to somebody who is designing proteins in a biopharmaceutical company, they're probably not using it. So there's going to be lots and lots of these applications which are all yet to come and yet to happen.
I think as a firm, we've been investing a lot in sort of the picks and shovels, right? So we're investing a lot of silicon systems and just the underlying hardware. We're not investing in models. We're not investing in mainstream consumer-oriented applications. But that said, the people that are making money right now is very, very small. I mean, you can count. Only one company, right? So one of the large hyperscalers, I won't say who, they have a large suite of productivity applications, and tens of billions of dollars in the productivity application. They said to us that for them to incorporate GPT-4 as part of a Copilot architecture, and if they were to run it on their infrastructure, their cloud architecture, and you'll know who it is if I say anything more, they said that between now and the next 18 months, they have to spend $48 billion on their infrastructure to just make the productivity applications that they offer to become Copilot enabled, okay? So some guy down the road is laughing all the way to the bank as a $3 trillion company. You and I are not going to pay just because you have a productivity application that has Copilot attached to it.
Yeah.
So this large hyperscaler hasn't figured out how they're going to make money. So all this big infrastructure build out that's happening, which NVIDIA makes a lot of money, and all these hyperscalers that are putting that infrastructure thinking that they're going to add AI as an adjunct to a productivity application, they haven't figured out how they're going to make money. So the big, I would say 80% or 90% of the activity in AI has no business model yet. Now that's not to say that it is profoundly transformational, right? We all know it. I mean, case in point, I'm sure all of you have, show of hands, how many of you have downloaded Notebook LLM? Yeah, so just try it. Truly transformational. You throw a book in there, PDF a book, load it up, and it'll create a podcast of two people talking about it. It'll create a summary. So there are unbelievable use cases that are getting figured out without the underlying business model getting figured out. So I think this is a period of, what is that, you storming, norming, forming, whatever. I don't know where we are in that phase. The people that are building infrastructure and people that are making ingredient technology, they know, how they're going to make money. The only exception I can point to is healthcare. So we have a company that, we have a bunch of companies that are actually taking AI into the healthcare area, and those are going to be unbelievably valuable. And to your earlier point, the disruption is in labor. So I don't know if you know, there are 250,000 radiology polyclinics in the US, roughly. And each one of them is mom and pop owned. I mean, there are some that are aggregated with a bunch of people. And each one of these polyclinic type setups, which, you go in for a scan, whatever, the CapEx that they have is roughly about $500,000 to $1 million. 250,000 of them, right? That's what it is. And they have 3 people. And for those of the women that are here, and God forbid if you have to go take a mammogram or whatever, but if you do, go before 11 o'clock. And the reason is the propensity for people to make mistakes, the humans to make mistakes, in the second half of the day with both false positives and false negatives is highly correlated. And the reason for that is they're sitting in this dark room, 3 people, and trying to read a scan, and they miss all the time. Now, AI fundamentally changes that. So there are a bunch of companies that will actually identify 3 millimeter, tumor. And that is unbelievably valuable. And the insurance companies will want to give the reimbursement at a different rate if the accuracy of the prediction is much higher. So there is an underlying business model that I think can create this flywheel for AI. In some cases, there are also in financial services. But again, the larger point is very few number of business models figured out.
Yeah, one other point I'll make, if you go back and look in history, Netscape went public in 94. Google wasn't formed till 98. So if you think about the internet, Google is kind of the epitome of internet. So in my mind, and their search paradigm and and how they monetize it, they figured out actually way past 98. So that is where things are with AI. And there's also this similar kind of parallels where if you go back and look in history, people said we're going to run out of bandwidth. There won't be enough bandwidth to do this. There's not enough cable coming into your houses. What are you going to do? There's not enough speed. And that all got solved. And I think that's kind of what's going to happen. Like right now, everybody's talking about not enough GPUs, not enough costing a lot. So it sounds to me like some of these things will be solved by people developing new hardware, new chips, and new software and making it better. So all of these things are going to get solved, and we are just in the first inning.
But Jay, I was going to say, as you were talking about this, there are some unintended positive consequences. So one could argue Elon, potentially single-handedly has contributed more to reducing sort of carbon footprint because of what he's done, right? I would argue, and this is a kind of in the realm of controversial topics, right? I would argue AI probably will contribute more towards the movement of clean energy generation than anything else that we have seen, because the amount of power required is astronomical, right? Truly astronomical. So movement to, there are right now at least 10 entities creating multi-gigawatt data centers, right? So how is that going to be powered? So a lot of renewables, a lot of
is it renewables or is it nuclear? Because that's the cleanest energy. Well, it's not the cleanest.
My point is, that movement is an unintended consequence in the positive.
Yeah. So wait, so let's there is a telescopic view, then there is a microscopic view, right? I think you're both talking about what I would call the telescopic view about this great green pasture we're going to have, right? So here is a question, right? So and when we do the math at McKinsey, right? So just in the last 12 months. The software product revenues from Gen AI, and this is leaving out all the things that are claimed, but really, like if you just, and this does not include chips and so on, is close to $21 billion, right? So
21 billion?
Yeah,
wow. Okay.
21 billion, okay? So which means customers have paid $21 billion in cash in the last 12 months, okay? So the question is—
Gen AI software, wow.
Yes, and by the way, this is
I would
everything
have a hard time
from
believing that, but yeah.
No. By the way, this is like, because if you just add up Microsoft alone co-pilots, because that's truly Gen AI.
It goes back to my earlier
they're only
point.
making
Right?
900 million.
No. The question here is, do you think, what's the value, right? And if you think the value will come, because $21 billion, the promise is at least 10x in value capture, okay? For customers that use it. Otherwise, why would they buy it, right? Like in terms of ROI. Are they going to decrease headcount? Are they going to get more revenue? Where is the value from a microscopic perspective? Because the question that CEOs are all wrestling with, right, is the tech guys they're having a party. The investors are having a party, right? I'm kind of representing, the CEOs I talk to.
Yeah.
But they are like, I'm the one left holding the bag. I don't see the value now, right? And there is promise, but from a microscopic perspective, what's your, or in fact, I would love to invite, the audience as well. Who's capturing value? Where do you think, what are the sources of value capture here?
I still think when I look at our portfolio companies, we have done like a, AI agent for property managers, AI agent for legal. It is coming out of kind of making people more productive, right? It is basically, if you look at the law firms who are paying like, $600K, $700K for this product, it is not coming out of their IT budget. Their IT budget is 100K. So it is coming out of...
Headcount is going to go down then.
It is coming out of labor, yes. It is. The headcount meaning they are just getting more, the cost of doing something. It's not like headcount is going down. It's just that the same person can just be more productive and do more
Productivity going up.
Productivity going up.
I would take a slightly different point of view here. I think we all get caught up in the world that we live in, where we use, all kinds of apps, we use all kinds of devices, and everybody looks like us, and in Silicon Valley, and we think that's where the world is. I think AI applications where what's the right word? The ability to monetize is much higher in a certain class of applications, and I would like to call that BDD.
Okay.
The boring, dirty, and dangerous.
Okay.
So any environment where you have repetitive tasks, like some of the BPO tasks, Chris was here earlier, will get disrupted. The second order derivative of that is disruption in labor, right? But that labor has to move up to higher skill thing. So that's kind of like the boring stuff. The dirty, there's so many highly risky and dirty sort of monitoring activity that you do, whether it's online, whether it's offline, whether it's physical world, monitoring activity, which AI can make a fundamental difference, and people will throw money at it, and we'll make money on that. And then there's the dangerous, right? I mean, doing power line monitoring and doing predictive analysis on when something can fail, factory floor, when something can fail. Some of those things are really dangerous activities from a labor standpoint. Those things will get replaced completely. So the monetization potential for those three categories of industries is much higher than you and I paying for, will you pay for, like I just looked at my iPhone subscription, and I've got like 50 apps, and I don't even know what those apps are, and I'm paying $5, $10 a month each, and my phone bill is like $800. I mean, that's ridiculous. Am I going to go spend another, $30 for an Office app just because it has Copilot? Probably not, right? So I think that's the distinction I would make.
So I guess, so what you're really saying is, Jay, you were talking about what I would call, what the economists would call jobless growth, right? Because labor productivity going up, you can do more with less, right? That is one, and then two.
But then I would also talk about the Jevons paradox, where it has always been shown that whenever the cost of a resource goes down, actually the usage goes up.
Yeah.
So I think people are thinking of jobs are going to go away, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're just going to be used and become more productive, and
more consumption,
and more consumption of something or some work or labor, and eventually actually people are ending up going to have better lives because they're not going to be doing this boring stuff or dangerous stuff. And by the way, I love your way of framing the
BDD.
The BDD. but that's what's going to happen. I don't, I'm an optimist, and you can't say that everybody's going to lose their jobs.
But remember, consumption going up doesn't naturally translate to monetization going up.
Yeah.
These are two completely different things.
Yeah.
I mean, we all use search all day long, and it doesn't mean that we as consumers are paying it.
Somebody's paying it. Google makes a $2 trillion company.
Exactly, but you have to ask the question. Google actually succeeded in transfer of ad spend from traditional media to them.
Yeah.
And if you said AI is going to do something similar as a result of consumption, What is it replacing?
I don't know. I wish I knew. And even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you because I would be investing in that.
That's why I'm on the panel with you, so I'll actually know.
I'd keep it to myself. No, seriously,
No.
I don't know, right? That is
No,
the
but I
beauty.
think this is a $1 trillion question, isn't it? Right? Which is at the end of the day, it's is IT spend. By the way, the best forecast for IT spend is actually slower growth rate than for the next 3 years than the last 5 years, which means there has to be transfer, right? There has to be substitution,
yes.
which means there will be winners and losers here, right? Which is somebody else is going to lose. Now, let me maybe just switch questions. How many of you here are in the startup ecosystem in some form or shape here? Okay, a good chunk. So here is a question for the panelist here, which is, this is the first disruption in the last, I would say, 50 years, where the incumbents have a massive advantage because of the capital needs and data needs, yeah? This is why, everyone from NVIDIA to Microsoft to Google and Amazon and Meta, right? Because of those two needs, right? And where in every other disruption, it's been a startup that's actually appended the game. This is one, right? Do you think that is going to be the way going forward, or will that change?
So first of all, I actually think the reason why the incumbents are actually doing well, and because this time the management teams are much smarter and much more focused. I think if you go back in history, it was, some of the, like internet, right? The cable companies were going to win, and, even, what's his name? Mark Andreessen actually started a set-top box before it became Netscape. I think this is, the change is not that, of course they have capital and they have all that advantage, but if you look back in history, cable companies had that too. I think the management teams of these hyperscalers and NVIDIA are super, super competent and focused and doesn't want to let the thing go.
Yeah, I would say your question, the premise of your question is right, but I think the conclusion you're making is wrong. And that is, we keep talking about the hyperscalers and the Microsofts and the NVIDIAs of the world. The world doesn't look like that outside of the 40 square miles here. It looks very different. Okay. So I would contend the guys, but your premise, the reason why I said your premise is right is because it's capital and data. And guess who has the most amount of data? Financial services companies. Amex and JP Morgan and Citibank and those guys have an unbelievable amount of data about your patterns. Aramco has unbelievable amount of data and workflow in the energy ecosystem. So I think this view that we have, the money is to be made just in tech, I think is probably flawed when it comes to AI, because the disruption and the benefits of that disruption is probably not in tech. It's probably in all the other industries which are going to get transformed.
But Sriram, I do think you're absolutely right that Aramco or FinTech, they will have the data, but I think the hyperscalers are still going to be it's going to be very hard to replace, like them, even on the LLMs.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
That portion of spend that these vertical applications or vertical industries are going to do is all probably going to run on these hyperscalers.
No, I completely agree.
So what's one example, right? So let's go with your thought. I love the provocation. What's the one example of a non-tech incumbent who's actually established or who's beginning to establish leadership in this space?
Well, it's too early to say leaders. We're all like, who's the tallest midget, right? Everybody else in tech is all small. So, they're not making money. So I think that's not the
like
potential.
Yeah.
Well, all healthcare companies. Just look at
What's a
Kaiser.
good example?
Take Kaiser. Take insurance companies. Cigna, the largest insurance company nationwide, or people like that, right? So they have unbelievable amount of data, and they don't need to depend on Llama or GPT or anything like that. They could actually build their own language models, right? But to Jay's point, the hyperscalers, because of the fact that they have this incredible amount of capital, they have incredible amount of infrastructure, they're going to run it. Like one of our companies is a company called Sambanova, which I'm sure many of you guys know. It's a full stack company all the way from silicon to systems to software to the model, all of it. They're trying to compete with NVIDIA. But the difference is they're trying to do it as a inference as a service company. So they go to, could be JP Morgan or Aramco or somebody like that, who's not going to, the thing that we forget is that because, everybody has seen the internet movie and they don't like the ending. And the ending is there are, $10 trillion of value over here, in 30 square miles. And people don't like that. So no sovereign is going to have its sovereign data at a hyperscaler running in Seattle or in Mountain View. So they're going to build infrastructure in their own location, and they're going to be competing with it. And if they have the data, bulk of the value creation and monetization is going to be not in Silicon Valley.
I really hope you're right, because you are saying democratization of value creation.
I kind of agree, but I also disagree to some extent, because I think like a good example in healthcare, right? There's a company called Abridge. I don't know if you guys know. Doing great. Basically, they take all the data from the doctors and provide a summary and kind of all kinds of things that they're doing with the data. And yeah, they have like healthcare systems as a customer, and a lot of the value will accrue to the healthcare providers and the hospitals who are using this. But a lot of it is actually also going to go to a bridge, right? Because they're so in that way, if you're building startups, you can build these vertically focused startups that goes and helps these people with data, because not all of them are going to be able to build the products, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And what you said and what I said are not mutually exclusive.
That's
right? Because
absolutely.
both of us can be right. Because the point I was just making is that the value of AI is far bigger in industry transformation than enterprise applications for productivity.
Yes.
That's the only point I'm making.
Yes.
Only two investors can say the opposite things and actually agree with each other. It's amazing how that works. No, but we have about 5 more minutes. Why don't I just open it up to questions?
Sure.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Man with the mic.
Man with the mic gets to speak. Great panel, interesting, diverging view. And you brought up very interesting points, Sriram, that all these companies have a lot of data and they can use that data. But we have seen this historically. Blockbuster had a lot of data. What happened to Blockbuster? All Barnes & Noble had huge data. What happened to Barnes & Noble? Even you can say to some extent, Walmart had huge data. What happened to Walmart? I mean, it still exists, but compared to Amazon. Do they have capacity and capabilities? And that's where I think, in my view, this hyperscaler will be enabling a lot of entrepreneurs here to disrupt them. And I think that's where really the advantages are going to come from and the benefits are going to come. What is your take on that? So
if you take an utility, okay, the largest utility in California, is the PUC with PG&E. They have a wire coming to every one of our homes. They know what is connected at the other end of the wire. They know what your usage pattern is and all of that. You never think of them as anybody that's doing anything innovative or meaningful. The only thing that I'm pointing out is that the hyperscaler, based on the infrastructure that they're building by itself, is necessary and critical. The only point I'm making is that they run the risk of becoming a utility. Because if I have huge amounts of compute and inference, I mean, what is it that prevents you and me to go have a 100,000 GPU data center? 2 things. Supply, because Jensen is not going to return your call or my call. Number 2, you and I don't have the money, and Microsoft has it. The only question that we have to ask ourselves is that enough to establish long-term sustainable advantage? The day there is alternative for the H200 or Blackwell or whatever, and it's available for the asking, then the question is, how does a hyperscaler differentiate itself?
But I will point out that I think the existing incumbents in any kind of vertical, right, they will be marginalized if they don't get on the Gen I wagon, right? So yeah, everybody, that's why all the banks are like, doing all these projects. They're all trying to figure out, because they know it's coming, and they saw like in the internet something change, and people who didn't keep up with it, like Blockbuster and all those people, were no longer there. But on the other hand, some of the banks went away, but some of the banks who were adopted, online and stuff like that, they existed and got even bigger. So I think that's what's going to happen.
PV.
Quick question. How, as startup investors and deep tech investors, and what advice are you giving startups where they're not picking up pennies in front of steamrollers? Right? How do these startups avoid becoming roadkill? What are you advising your AI startups?
Well, he's pointing it to me because he wants to know what advice I'm giving.
I don't know.
But listen, I think this friendly banter is really because, your mileage may vary, right? It all depends on, the only thing that I tell the startups that we invest in is if you think you've figured it out, it's kind of like quantum mechanics. I think it's Niels Bohr who said that if you understood quantum mechanics, then you really haven't. And if you think that a startup has figured out how to do it, they haven't. Because what happens is if they are not adaptive to the changes that are happening so fast and not willing to change, they're screwed. So the only advice I give my startup is your business model is as good as it was yesterday, is only today. Yeah. Wait till tomorrow. Yeah. It's going to get disrupted. Yeah. So that constant fear that you're going to get disrupted is the only way these startups are going to survive.
So the only advice I give is that, look, the only thing that doesn't change a business model is whether you're efficient and eventually generate cash or not. So if you're going to build a kind of a company that's going to need like 40 billion to get to cash flow break even, I think, you have to be a really good storyteller and have lots of backers.
Well, clearly, Sam Altman doesn't agree with you.
We'll see where it ends, right? I don't know, but everybody believes that Netscape would also get all the value, and would be kind of dominating the internet. So.
Okay, one last question, then we'll try.
Hi, great panel. Sandesh Mali from Ignite 23. The question I have is, if you think about our last panel, the human brain takes about 20 watts of power, something like a light bulb, whereas an equivalent AI infrastructure takes about 1,000 times. So as you think about power consumption and costs of power to continue the AI journey beyond the hyperscalers that sort of are growing at any cost, how do you think about that?
It's a great question, right? So I have an unverifiable point of view, so I can say it, because nobody can disagree with this, and that's the following. Human beings, you're absolutely right. We consume 20 watts of power, and we can learn, and we can infer, and we can tweak and modify the output of whatever the inputs are and be productive, right? And we do it starting from age 2. So this notion that you have training and inference segmented and separated, that's not how the human brain works. So if artificial intelligence is trying to create this capacity of inference and training in a segmented fashion, then up until you have unbelievable amount of power available, you're not going to be able to solve this problem, right? So unless inference happens in situ with training, you're not going to be able to reduce it, because you have to build this incredible infrastructure, create all these models, train the system, do reinforcement learning for human interface, all of that. We have to do all of that, and then the model is ready so that we can release GPT-5. I think, I don't know what the answer is, but that is one of the fundamental problems where we're on the slippery slope of unmitigated disaster in terms of power consumption. And so there's some innovation, some startup is going to figure out how to do in situ inference and training.
Well, no, my point is that if you look back in history, people said we're going to run out of bandwidth for video, that you would never be able to watch a movie on your phone. And look what we do now. We go around the whole world, like in a plane now with Starlink, watching movies. So I think the same thing. Now, Sriram's answer is actually the technical version of what I'm saying, that people are going to figure out, and that's what's going to be needed. But here, that again, technology will figure this thing out. Like people are very good at if there is a problem, bounded problem, to figure it out. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think this power need that people are projecting is probably not going to be as much as you need. Over time, these models are going to get more efficient, more power efficient, and everything will get solved.
We're already seeing this, right? Which is, if you look at the two nuclear startups, right? I think we're going to solve, or we're going to have almost like 3x more capacity than what we might need. But
I think even without the power being solved by nuclear, I think what Sriram was saying, these kind of techniques will be used to solve how much training you need for these models.
Well, I think both Jay and I both spent time at Intel at various periods, and I know that Raja is here. It was another chip expert. Our friend Gelsinger was the guy who came up with this point that if Intel kept driving 30 years ago, 20 years ago, the megahertz clock speed race, soon enough they will have to define an architecture or a chip which will be consuming or will be as hot as the whatever he said the surface of the sun, which was true if it was a linear development across maximizing clock speed. And Intel figured out the whole multi-core segmenting, partitioning, and now that's changed to chiplets. So there's a way to solve power problems in semiconductors that has happened. So question is, what kind of innovation is going to happen in inference in situ, in those sorts of things, which will reduce the overall consumption of power, because the trend that we're on is unsustainable.
thank you.
Thank you, Chandra, Sriram, and Jay. Great conversation, boots on the ground perspective, and we really appreciate it.